I don't know.
Just nerves now. Put it down that beer for sure.
Got my water.
Check, check, check. All right, guys. Chris, you mind closing those doors for me in the back? Are we good on the camera, Chris? Yep. All right. Awesome. All right. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. This is actually going to be our final Tech Talk of the calendar year. So a bit of a joyous occasion, a little sad for me too. But we are going to come back with extreme force in the new year. We have some amazing speakers lined up next year. But let's focus on tonight. So do I have the clicker? I'm actually forgetting everything tonight. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so really quick housekeeping announcement. We have actually surpassed 1,000 members in the meetup group thanks to you guys. So big round of applause. Awesome. And if you haven't heard me say this before, as always, all of our resources, slides, videos all go up on the meetup page and achievers.com/tech. So if you know somebody that missed this talk tonight and they want to see it later, just point them in that direction and they can check it out. I know a lot of people were asking questions on the meetup group as well. All right? So without further ado, I'm going to give it up for a gentleman who's doing his first Achievers Tech Talk ever. He's extremely nervous. Extremely nervous. He just told me 30 seconds ago that he forgot everything that he was going to say. So he's laughing, but he's really nervous. Anyways, give it up for Mr. Scott Spencer.
I'm actually not that nervous. I just drank a lot, so that's why I forgot everything I was about to say. But that's okay, because it brings the words faster. All right, so I guess today, as we all know, we're here to talk about scaling a user interface. And that's my name. I'm Scott Spencer. I'm saying Achievers Tech Talks, because that's what we're all about. Sorry. All right, so a little bit about me. I joined Achievers in November of 2010. I'm one of the team leads here for software development. Some professional highlights. When I first started, we were a Java platform, and I had the joyous occasion to come in, throw the Java platform out, and start building everything up in PHP. And that's what I did. And ever since then, since we released that beautiful piece of code, we've just been making it better, building on it, adding new features. And after a while, I just decided, you know what, I'm kind of getting sick of this desktop stuff. I'm really going to try to make everyone believe that mobile is something they'll let me spend my time in. So after kind of dragging a yes out of my bosses and letting them let me work on it for a little bit, I was finally given a team to build out a full mobile experience. And that's pretty much the coolest thing that's ever happened to me, because then I was able to right all of the wrongs that we did in the first place, because as we're going to show you, there was a lot of wrongs that I did. And it's kind of a cool place to have a little redemption. And I guess the last thing is, I love UI, because there's nothing cooler than having a user interface that people like using, makes people happy, and it just makes me happy. Cool. So why is UI so important? The trend is leaning towards more user interaction. That's pretty obvious. As you see all the websites going on right now, there's a lot more clean, easy-to-use UI. It's becoming the norm. It's almost expected of you. If you don't have a good UI, people are just not going to use your application. They're just going to say, this guy's a joke. I'm not going to spend any time on my site. I do not enjoy what I'm doing. This is a chore. So 3 years ago, we spent about 10 to 20% of our time doing UI. And there was about 2 of us. We spent maybe 1 day a week actually doing UI. But most of the time, we were working on our backend code. But now, at Achievers, we're spending about 40% of our time doing UI, which is pretty cool. We have a full team that are actually, their entire job is building out UI, making sure event handlers work well, our framework is cool. And it's awesome to see the jump from 10 to 20% to 40%, because you can really see the quality of our platform increase because of this. And lastly, front-end architecture is just as important than back-end. Some people here would kind of laugh at that, probably the people in the back standing, because they're like, ah, back-end, so cool. But DB request time is king, but we all know that user experience is queen. And the queen runs the castle. Let's be honest. All right, so just as a little heads up, today I'm really going to be talking just high-level stuff. Some of the problems we ran into with our front end, some of the tools we use to fix it, and the things that us at Achievers we used and why we used it. But if you guys really do want to dig deeper, let us know, because we're really looking to expand our UI talks, and we want to hear from you guys about what you actually want to talk about. If you don't want to talk about something weird that I'm not even going to touch on, that's cool, because someone here probably knows a lot about it. And if not, we can research and make ourselves look like we do. And as we all know, you ain't nothing without a great UI. Cool, an agenda. So first I'm going to talk a little bit about our platform, just so you can kind of touch base about what we do, what it looks like, what's involved, so that when I'm talking about things, because obviously I know our platform pretty well, so the things I'm going to be talking about are tied into our platform. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, you might kind of get lost. So we're going to touch on that. Then I'm going to talk about what went wrong. So this is when we first built out our platform. We were really rushed, just a lot of the things that we didn't really think about. All the problems we had, the silliness we did, and just all of that fun stuff. Then we're going to talk about what's going right. So things we've really took a step back, realized that when we did it, we did this wrong, we didn't even consider this, and just talk about how we looked at that and how we improved on what we did wrong before. And then lastly, what's not good enough. This is mostly my time to have a public call out to my bosses so that they allow me to do even more cool stuff. So just kind of let me do that. I'm sorry. Cool. All right, so let's start off. Our platform, insight into our product and a good starting point. Here's our product. Yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it? So this is our homepage for our product. As you can see, there is a news feed. The news feed is actually what I'm going to be touching a lot on today. It's pretty much the core of my talk. It's talking about the news feed, talk about how we created it before, how it was terrible, how we want to create it again, how we did create it again, blah, blah, blah. But the news feed is this. And then over here, you can see your points balance. I'm not going to jump. This points balance is where you accumulate points through peer recognition. You give thanks to people. It really drives employee engagement when you do something really good for, say, David and I sit down, we write a nice little JavaScript module, and David says, you know what, Scott, thanks for your help. Here's 500 points. That increases my points balance. And you ask yourself, where do those 500 points come from? My points to award. Up there, you'll see that I have 0 points to award. That's because I am a great employee, and I'm always giving people recognition, which is fantastic. Some people have a lot of points to award, but we'll not call names. And so this is what we like to kind of call it your budget. Kind of makes sense. You have a budget every week to give people recognition, so this is where your budget is shown. And lastly, just a little bit more about peer-to-peer. We have free peer-to-peer, so up here, this is our thank you. So it's kind of just, you know what, thanks for your help. It wasn't worth $5, but thanks for your help anyways, which is cool. And then lastly, there is our points-based recognition, which is down here. Nicole did an actual good job, so she got $5 for it. And yeah, it's the same thing, but we attach a monetary value to it because money is a great incentive, unless I'm wrong. Like, I don't know, you guys might disagree. Cool, so who here has a newsfeed in their application? One person. Multiple people that work at Achievers. Excellent. So now when you're going to hear me talk about news feeds, you're going to go in and you're going to do it right, which is cool because who doesn't get to go, love getting to go and develop something pretty cool like a news feed? It was probably one of the coolest things I've done. All right. So now some more super techie things. It's not that super, it's PHP. But yeah, it's a PHP MySQL backend, just a typical LAMP stack. I have a page load of approximately 0.3 seconds on the backend, which is super cool, and about 3 seconds total. So the 3 seconds total, personally, is one of the biggest things. We want to really bring that down, make it a faster page load for people so that as soon as they hit it, they see everything, and they can use our site. We get about 900,000 page visits per month, which is pretty awesome. And right now, it's actually getting more with our holiday rush, but that's a pretty good number. And lastly, when we started out, our UI was primarily PHP-driven HTML. So with event-oriented JavaScript. Does anyone here actually know what I'm talking about with PHP-driven HTML with event-oriented JavaScript? Cool, a lot of people don't. Good. So this is PHP-driven HTML at the top and event-oriented JavaScript at the bottom. I'm sorry, it's just who shows code? So in here you have an array called users, which is aptly full of users. And if there are people in that array, we just kind of loop through it and then print out links to their profile. So you looping through the array. If you want, you can have a comma or maybe an ampersand. And then there's just links to their profile with their username. And then down here is the event-oriented JavaScript. So you just have it on everything with the class of user link. Whenever you hover over it, you show the user pop-up, which is kind of like, on Facebook, when you hover over someone's name, just their little information, you can message them on our platform, you can recognize them, you can see their profile, just a little bit of their information. So that's what that would do. So this is PHP-driven HTML and event-oriented JavaScript. Does everyone kind of understand what I'm talking about now? Cool, it's the last time I'm talking about it. All right, so let's scale this down. Our newsfeed. Cool, it's a typical newsfeed with typical newsfeed interactions. You can like an event, you can comment on an event, and if you're part of an event, you can share it to your Facebook, LinkedIn. It's kind of like, yeah, I got recognized, everyone. You better recognize I got recognized. And I have a serious love-hate relationship with our newsfeed. As I've kind of hinted at a little bit, it's a pretty serious love-hate relationship. So I originally made it about 3 years ago. It was one of the first things I did here. And since then, it's pretty much stayed the same. And I think we can all agree something that's 3 years old gets a little stagnant, especially, have you ever looked at something you've written 3 years ago and you kind of think to yourself like, oh my God, I'm so much better at my job. But then you kind of look at it a little bit more and then you get a little depressed and you're like, oh my God, I was so bad at my job. And then you kind of look at it a bit more and you're like, oh my God, I got so much better at my job. And you just it's a freaking roller coaster. Yeah. Every time I open our application, it looks me right in the face. And that is great. Cool. So, why the hate? Yeah. No.
Total page time, load time is 3 seconds.
Yeah.
I think the event's only 1 second, actually less than 1 second.
Not bad. Is that with also with the page loading everything? Everything?
Including your server wait time, I cannot believe how fast it was.
Well,
And it's 1
thank you.
megabyte load. How do you do that?
We're going to talk about that. Maybe. But no, yeah, we've actually been spending a lot of our time just kind of shrinking down our JavaScript, making sure everything is a lot quicker to load. We're doing a lot of work right now just to make everything faster, which we're going to talk about a little bit, but thank you. I will tell the people that actually did the work that it's recognized. Wait, which site did you go to? Do you use our platform?
No, I went to Kingdom.
Okay. Oh, nice. Cool. I have no. All right. Thank you. So, when I developed the newsfeed, I had no real consideration for the future or any reusage. I was told, Scott, we have this newsfeed, you have to do it. We have 0 time to do it, but we'll give you a little bit, so just come on and do it. So when I built it out, I was rushed, and I just cared about getting it out and making sure it looked good. And I didn't take any thoughts about how is this newsfeed going to be used in the future? How is it going to be extended in the future? What's going to be added to the newsfeed? I just thought, am I going to be able to go to bed tonight? And I did, because I got it out in time. But it took a lot of work, but I didn't do it properly. But we learn. And it consists of multiple PHP view files. It's kind of cool. We used view-lets a little bit, but not to their full extent. We just kind of PHP view file to do this, PHP view file to do this. And to be honest, I'm going to touch on it a little bit, but code is all over the place, maybe even a bit more. But we had a controller level, sometimes even model level code in our view files. It was all over the place. Another thing is we had lots of inline script and style tags. Does everyone know why that's such a terrible decision? Does anyone? Right there, Phil Miller. Why is that a bad decision? Exactly. Because it's laughable. You can't cache it. You can't reuse it. You can't, it's just, you write it once, and if you want to use it again, you have to copy and paste it and put it somewhere else. It's just, it's a terrible decision for both script and style. And for style, even worse. Because if you write nice little CSS files, you're doing things properly, but then you have an inline style tag that overwrites it, it's always going to overwrite it. And you just don't know why it's overwriting. It's like, why is my link this weird pink? It's because it's an inline pink, and you did it to yourself. So just lastly, the code was a mess. It was just all over the place, and there was one person to blame, and he's talking right now. All right, so what went wrong? That wasn't even what went wrong. That was just kind of an intro to what went wrong. So what went wrong, or the failures we learned from, let's give it a go. So our CSS structure. We talked a little bit before about how we had a lot of inline CSS, but that was just the tip of the iceberg for our excellent CSS structure. We had one file, it was called global.css. I was thinking, yeah, global.css, that's a pretty typical CSS name for all of your styles. Unfortunately, global.css was primarily for all of the layout. We had our floats, the width, the structure for everything, the real, like the CSS architecture, if you may. And then we decided it'd be a great idea to have a CSS sheet called skin.css. And within that, we kind of had all of the colors, or the skin, as you may. So this is just a terrible idea, because we had two files that were changing the exact same thing. So if you wanted to tell yourself, this actually needs to be 50 pixels wide, you have to go into global.css. And then you realize, I don't want this hot pink. You have to go into skin.css and find out in two different places. It's just not scalable, and you're not thinking about the future. And also, our global.css actually had over 4,000 CSS selectors in it, which, as I'm sure we all know, actually I just found this out, IE breaks if you have more than 4,096 CSS selectors in it. So after the 4,097 CSS selector, it's like, you know what? We're good here. I'm not going to take your CSS. I think you're getting a little excessive, global.css. We're done. So yeah, great CSS structure. And then, of course, we had manual override. I felt like I couldn't leave manual override out. Everyone loves it. It's actually like we have our program structure where other companies will use our platform. And of course, they want to make it look like their company. So if Rogers was using it, then it would look red, Bell would look blue, blah, blah, blah. So manual override is where we would do that styling just to make sure that companies feel at home using our platform, which is quite lovely. And once again, lots of style tags in our PHP view files. Our CSS was all over the place. Cool. So where's the JavaScript at? That's a good question. So in our newsfeed, we're just going to talk about our newsfeed for a bit now. A lot of our JavaScript was in PHP view files. Like if you open up a PHP view file, I'd say about 35 to 50% of it was within a script tag, which is awesome. It was the best. Great job, Scott. And also, we did have a newsfeed script.js, so it was cool. We decided that halfway through, what are we doing? We're doing things in script tags. So we thought toss some code in a newsfeed script.js just to feel really good about ourselves. Not a lot. But then we realized that, our newsfeed is going to be used in other places like the profile. I should create a profile newsfeed script.js. Real scalable. It was just terrible. It was pretty much a copy and paste, but then changing a few of the API URLs, a few little lines of code here and there. We were really, really thinking about the future here. We really sat down and thought about our architecture. But it was mostly in the PHP view files, so we're okay. God. Sorry, I'm getting a little upset with myself as I talk about this. So, our view files. View files. Kind of looping through all the events, changing the data in them, manipulating the data to be what we wanted, adding a little bit of HTML into the data, and then we would loop through the events and actually output the HTML. It's asinine, how crazy our view files looked. I feel really bad for when new people come on, they're like, oh, you have to fix a bug on the newsfeed. Like everyone that's worked here for longer just goes, haha, that guy has to use the newsfeed. Because we just know it's so hard to figure out what is going on in there. Yeah, as I talked about before, failed attempt at viewlets. We had like newsfeed event comment views, which is pretty cool, worked out nicely, or newsfeed events view, but it just kind of, it wasn't bad. It just wasn't perfect, so I considered it a failure. And then there's our landing pages. So the landing pages are like the detailed pages for a newsfeed event. You all know them. You just click on it. It gives you all the comments, who's actually liked it. If it's a long recognition or a Facebook post, it will show the full text. So yeah, our landing pages. Don't get me started on our landing pages. They are the worst. There's multiple views for different detailed event pages. So if you have one newsfeed event type, it looked like this. If you had another, it would look like that, where this and that obviously don't equal. Come on, guys. So there's different look and feel for different event types. There's different look and feel, the different usage, so the data had to be different. And there was just no unification between everything. It was messy. So here's one. This is my anniversary. Congratulations, Scott. I was here for 3 years. And then here's a peer recognition. They're totally different. The only things that's the same are the things that we've added in since then, like this boost tag, we changed the buttons. But other than that, the font's the same. That's cool. But other than that, they're completely different. It's crazy. There's just no unification for our landing pages. It was all over the place. So we're going to talk a little bit about how extendable, reusable, and great our newsfeed was. Recently we just introduced a new newsfeed feature. It's called Boost. So Boost is, before I was talking about there was free recognition and points-based recognition. Still fresh in your minds? By the blank spares, I'm going to say yes. So we also have the same with your newsfeed likes. So there's just typical your free like, like, yeah, it's a great recognition, Scott, you're good shit. And they hit like. And then there's the coveted boost. The boost is you did a great job, but I don't want to spend the time writing out a recognition. There's already one there for you. We're good here, have some money. It's a points-based like. It's a great idea, it's a great feature. It's given me a lot of points, I'm not going to lie. I love boosts, and I didn't even have to implement it. So, when we did it for our desktop, there was a very, very interesting implementation. So the first thing we asked ourselves is, can we extend our newsfeed to use Boost? Now, our newsfeed was just HTML with JavaScript attached to it. You can't extend that. We had to go in and completely change the way the newsfeed was to make Boost work. We didn't even change it fully. We just kind of like hacked it in. Not hacked, we added it in nicely. So can this integrate with everything else in the UI? No. The budget I was talking about, if you boost one thing and then your budget changes, it took a lot of work to go in and check your budget, check all the other events to see whether they can be boosted, because there's obviously more than one event on a page. And just integrating your events and their boostability, that's a good word, their boostability with your budget and everything else was a hassle. It took a lot of work to go in and do it. And lastly, why is this so difficult? It's difficult because, like I said before, it's hard to check the budget against all of your events. It's hard to integrate in, like adding a new HTML into an event when it's boosted, because this HTML is quite arbitrary. And like the DOM events are the DOM element was not really attached to anything. It was just there. And lastly, there's no really simple way to update the boostability of an event. It's just, you had to go through, get new HTML, and put it in the page. So, after that, we decided, what are our main problems? Our CSS was all in a kerfuffle. Our UI had no architecture, just HTML with JavaScript attached to it. We had no way for different components to talk to each other. And lastly, our JavaScript was all over the place. It was just a mess. It was even in a kerfuffle. All right, so now we're done the sad part. Now on to the kind of the happy part, like what's going right, or where we are today, and how we got there. So, think to yourself, this probably could not, you guys had to get better. This is implemented really poorly. So, mobile, as I was talking about before, I was given a mobile from the ground up to kind of redo it, make it better, and I kind of thought to myself like, yeah, this is my redemption, I'm gonna make it better, I'm gonna do this differently. This is my redemption song, I figured. I'm gonna do this properly. I'm really excited about this. So I took a step back and really said to myself, how am I gonna do this properly? How am I gonna make this work? And how am I gonna make this work 3 years down the line when we wanna add some arbitrary feature to it and make it easy? So we realized we need something that had a, we need something to be modular. Something that we can kind of take this newsfeed, put it somewhere else, and then it would just work. It needed to have a solid JavaScript framework. So something that just, it wasn't more than just HTML. It was HTML that was attached to a data object. It was HTML that had a lot of event listeners to it that was attached to the same data object. And also, we needed real-time data parity. Excuse me. So if you boost one thing, you know automatically, without having to do much calculations, which ones you can't boost, how much budget you have left, and really where you are with your points. Cool. So once again, our main problems. Our CSS was all in a kerfuffle. How do I think to myself, how am I going to fix our CSS structure? How are we going to fix our CSS structure? There's more of us. Our UI had no architecture, so it was just HTML with JavaScript attached to it. So how are we going to tackle that? How are we going to tackle the way for different components to talk to each other? And how are we going to tackle the fact that our JavaScript was all over the place and we didn't know what was going on with it? Cool. Sass. Who here knows and uses Sass? Yeah, some excitement about Sass. Cool. Love a little quote here. CSS on its own can be fun, but style sheets are getting larger, more complex, and harder to maintain, which I think we can all agree to, especially with 4,100 CSS selectors. This is where a preprocessor can help. Sass lets you use features that don't exist in CSS yet, like variables, nesting, mixins, inheritance, and other nifty goodies that make writing CSS fun again. So basically, it takes CSS, but kind of makes writing it more computer science-y, which is great. And don't worry about all these buzzwords, because we're actually going to talk about what they are, so you're not thinking to yourself, I don't know what's going on. Cool. So, styling stylishly, as I like to put it. So, all of our news styles for the newsfeed can be found in one file, newsfeed.scss. It's great. You don't have to go skimming through global.css for all the different occurrences of the class we're looking for. It's all in one file. We can include. So include is great. So you know how when you're doing border radiuses on something, you don't want to have to remember like, dash WebKit border radius, dash Moz border radius. You can just include border radius for the border radius you want, and it spits out everything you need. It's beautiful. You can extend. So extend is kind of it's inheritance. If you have one class that has these styles to it, but then you have another class and you realize that it's using a lot of the same styles, you can just extend that class, and then that new class will have all of the new styles that you need from the old class. And lastly, almost lastly, there's object-oriented styling. So you can kind of have parent and children relationships. So you can have links that are within one div can look different than links within another div just by the way you structure your Sass file. It's pretty cool, and I'm going to give you an example. Don't worry, I'm not just going to throw words at you. So just know that object-oriented is a pretty cool part of it. And lastly, I use object-oriented very loosely there, by the way. Don't judge me. And lastly, there's variables, which is great, because if you have a primary color that you're going to be using all over the place, such as our purple, I forget what that purple hex color is because we just have a variable called primary color. If we want to use all of our links to be that primary color, we just use primary color. You don't have to worry about the hex codes. You don't have to worry about any of the fun stuff. You just throw it in there and you're on your way. Cool. So you're asking, what is this Sass you're talking about? Cool. So here's a few classes. You have your links holder, which is a div that holds links. Give it some padding, take away the margin, and then you include the border radius so that you don't have to worry about all the different browser-specific CSS for border radius. And then you're giving it a border that's 1 pixel solid and is half gray, half white. So you're just using the variable gray50. And then all links, tossing in text decoration none because no one likes the underline. And then over here you have user links. User links is it's kind of like a links holder, but it holds user links. Who'd have thunk? So it extends links holder, so it has all of the same styles of links holder already, but then we realize that we want the border to be a lot lighter. So we give it a gray 5 border color. And then within that, so all user links that are within the user links class, we know we want them to extend the link because no one wants the underline. We want them to float left, and we want the color of these links to be the purple, or whatever you set your primary color to be. So this is Sass in a nutshell. It's pretty cool. Cool. All right, our CSS has been decarfuffled. So next, we kind of realized that our UI really had no architecture. There was just HTML with JavaScript attached to it. So we decided, how are we going to really tackle this? We really needed a good framework for UI, something that gave our site a good backbone. So we used Backbone. Backbone.js is a great client-side MVVM, I'll get to that, JavaScript framework that provides structure to JavaScript applications by providing a view, a model, a collection, and event class objects. This is from Greg Franco. That'd be crazy if he was in the crowd because I don't even know who this guy was. They're just like, oh, this is a great quote. I'm going to steal it. But he's not, because he would have jumped up and be like, hey, that's my quote. So you think to yourself, MVVM, what are those? Is it from a movie? So model, view, view model is what it stands for. In Backbone, the models are kind of like your data models. There's your model, there's the model, and there's collections. Model is a data object. You can have all your attributes, you can have event listeners to it, but it's just think of it as a data object. And then collections, just think of it as a collection of data objects. For us, the newsfeed events were models. The newsfeed events was a collection of newsfeed events. So it's just an array of models. You can also have like classes too. So like when you add to the collection, you want something to happen. When you change an attribute in all of the events in a collection, you want something to happen. Just, they're models. And for us, a view isn't this view. I'm sorry, this is a little confusing, but this view is kind of the view model. We'll leave view for the last. The view model is kind of the same thing as a model. You can attach events to it, you can attach JavaScript to it, but it's where the event, like the event JavaScript are. So when you click on something within the view, you have the function in there. When you hover on something, you have the function in there. It's where it handles all of the DOM manipulations that are happening on the front end. And lastly, the view. For us, we just use handlebars templating. I'm not really going to touch on that at all. It's just handlebars. It's a great little way to template the view files. Does everyone here use handlebars? Show of hands? Yeah, like 8% people know what I'm talking about. That's cool. It's enough. All right, so Backbone. Like I said, it's a great JavaScript framework. It listens like the NSA, but it's a lot more reactive. So you can tell it so that whenever something happens, it can be listening for something to happen, and then as soon as someone hovers over an event, we want this to happen. As soon as someone boosts an event, we want all of these things to happen. You just attach events listeners to it, and it knows what's going to happen to all of the things, all of the objects that are attached to it. And it works perfectly with templating, because you just kind of create your view with the handlebars template I was talking about, and that is your DOM element, which is your master jQuery DOM element. You can use it as a selector, you can use it as a parent in selectors. It's just where everything that you working on for that view is located. And lastly, you know where all of your code is, which is great. You know if it's like, where am I going to change that hover event? It's in your view file. Or where am I going to change what happens when an event is boosted? It's in your data model. It's just all, kind of all makes sense. It all works together where everything is. Cool. So this is just a little visualization to see, just see kind of, for some people with are visual learners, I kind of am too. So the backbone router just kind of says like, oh, you're going to this part of your application, this URL. You're going to this backbone view. So the backbone view says, all right, we're here, talks to the backbone model and says, hey, we're at this view, give me some of the data objects that I need. And it talks to the server, gets the model events, gives it to the view, and then the view creates the DOM element, which is here, and updates the DOM. So then you go into your DOM, you're clicking around, and you click, say, a boost button. And whenever you click on the boost button in the DOM says, hey, backbone view, someone's boosting you. And the backbone view says, cool, man, I can boost that. So it talks to the backbone model, and it says, yo, someone wants to boost us. Here's their user PK. Here's their name. Just do your stuff and tell me what happens. So the backbone model goes in, does a boost, talks to the server, says, hey, server, someone wants to boost. Is that cool? The server says, yeah. And then the model tells the view, hey, view, we're good to boost. You can put everything up on the UI to show that everything's good. So then the view talks to the DOM, says, hey, DOM, we're good to go. Have this new element in your view. Make it slide in. Make it look nice. I don't care what you do, but just show that we have boosted our event. Does that make sense? Clear as mud? Great. And I know some people here kind of think to themselves like, Backbone. Backbone is the worst. It is perceived as super complicated. I know some people kind of, they look at Backbone, they look at it for like 20 minutes, and they say to themselves, I'm just going to worry about jQuery. We're good here. So who here is actually knows, who uses Backbone? It's like 6 people? Cool. So who knew what they were doing within 3 hours of looking at Backbone? Yeah, no one. It takes a long time to learn. It has a very high learning curve. But who said anything in life worth doing is easy? Because once you really learn Backbone, it changes the way you look at UI. It changes the way you develop it. Because it just kind of makes it a lot more computer science-y. You're not just putting this element here and then attaching things to it. You're making it more collaborative. Things are more talking to one another. You look like you have a question.
I do.
Yes?
So what actually led you to Backbone over another framework like Angular or something like that?
A lot of conversations. People really liked Backbone. I can't really talk too much about that. It's not fresh in my mind. It was a year ago, and there was a lot of conversation. Like, we like Backbone a lot more. Chris wants to talk about it.
We have some people that are
yeah.
really well versed after the talk.
And like before, like if you want to dig deeper in any of the things, like we're looking at, like before we had a PHP framework battle, thinking about maybe like a JavaScript framework battle. Just in the end, we do want to talk about more about digging deeper about things, but those are for other talks. I'm sorry. I let you down very nicely. Cool. So the one thing I can say is just jump on in. You kind of like you look at it and you think to yourself, this is really hard. I don't really want to learn this. You're only fooling yourself because UI is getting more complicated. It's getting more interactive, and it's soon going to be. In order to do good web UI, you're going to need to learn these JavaScript frameworks. So jump on in. All right. So our newsfeed 2.0. So we were talking a bit about the frameworks we were using, where we were going, what we were thinking. So we decided, all right, for the mobile newsfeed, we're going to do things right, and this is what we did. Our file structure was a lot more manageable. We did have probably more files, but they made more sense. All of our JavaScript were in JavaScript files that made sense. There's JavaScript files for the models, the views. I'm going to say that over and over again, but they were there. Yeah, look at that. Our landing pages were driven off of existing architecture. We didn't have to go in and manipulate any of the data to get our landing pages to show. We didn't have to do anything special. We didn't have to do anything extra. They were just there. And even better, we only had one of them. Who'da thunk? It was great. It was so much more scalable. We can just add new events to our newsfeed without having to worry about much. Great. So here's some code about this is our newsfeed event model. So just kind of show you a little bit about what's going on, just so, because some people, like, they're visual learners, so they want to look at some code. So here you have the model. You have your like events, like the URLs for when you're wanting to like an event or add a comment to it, just so they're there so you can just add to them and use them easily. There's comment success and fail. Down here there's like success and fail. It's just all functions that are there that you can call easily. It's all modularized. It's all easy to use. It's just right there. And this is our add comment function. I chose it because it was the shortest. So whenever you go in and the view tells the model, it's like, hey, we want to add a new comment. Here's the comment object. Do what you may and let me know what happens. So it goes in, says the new comment adds the user's information to it so that we all know who the user associated with the comment is. And then it goes in, adds a little extra stuff for the server, and then talks to the server, does an AJAX call. And then it says, when there's a success, do our comment success. When there's a fail, do our comment fail. But we're not even going to worry about that because we kind of develop here at Achievers for our JavaScript to have we assume it's just going to be fine. We just go in and just as soon as you do something, we put it on the UI and say, hey, we're not going to wait for the server to tell us it's fine. We're just going to assume it's fine. So we just add the comment to the comments collection and say, hey, the new comment is this comment. And then we tell everything, we just added a new comment, what you going to do about it? So then this kind of talks to our view, which then goes in, adds a new comment to the view, updates the number of comments on the view, and that's about it. Of course, if everything fails, a little error box comes up and says, hey, we lied, we actually didn't save that comment, do you want to try again? And then the cycle continues. But that's basically it for adding a comment. Does that make sense for people? Cool, a lot more head nods, I like it, people are getting into this. All right, so as we talked about before, Boost integration on our desktop was kind of painful. We all remember how long it took for the newsfeed on the desktop. It was about 2 weeks development time. For mobile, it took us, I think, around 2 days because we had everything built to use it properly. We could just add in the Boost event to the event set, the Boost event to the newsfeed event. So many events, I'm sorry. But you can add in the Boost event to the newsfeed event. You can check the budget super quick because it was already attached to this data object that existed. Everything was there. You can just do all of your communication, all of your calculations right there on the spot and not have to worry about everything. When you boosted something, all of your other events would just automatically update. It was beautiful. So here we are. Our CSS is no longer in a kerfuffle. Our UI finally had a little bit of architecture. It wasn't just HTML with JavaScript attached to it. It was more data objects with HTML attached to it, which is so much better for the future because you can just add more HTML to it. You can add more data objects to it. You can just add to it and not have to worry about whether it was going to break. So next, we realized that we needed a way for different components to talk to each other. Cool. So we decided to modularize all of the things. Why not? There's no reason why not. So does everyone here kind of know what AMD is, or asynchronous modular definition? Few nods, few no's. Okay, cool. Well, it's just a way to say, in order for this to work, we need all of these dependencies, and we need all of these files in order to work. So here is where we're defining our dependencies. We use require.js for this, by the way. So require.js just kind of lets you know that in order for our our newsfeed event model, which is this is the top part of the newsfeed event model, we know that we're going to have newsfeed comment collections, so that's a dependency. We know that we're going to have a boost model. The boost model is where all the work for the boosting is happening, so that's a dependency. And of course, it's going to be extending PA model. PA model is just our version of a backbone model. We just extend it. Extend a backbone model as PA model. PA stands for Platform A. Platform A stands for Platform of Achievers, because We're so cool, we like to make things in like 3 letters or less. So this is what we're doing. We're saying that in order for the newsfeed event to work, we needed to have newsfeed comment collections, which then brings in newsfeed comments. And we needed to have a boost model so that you could boost the events. So Require.js really just makes sure that there are dependencies. And it makes sure that when you're going and loading your JavaScript, it's grabbing all of the files needed, so you're not getting that dusty, undefined variable error, because no one likes an undefined variable. And lastly, it ensures that everything is in the proper scope. So you don't want to have a boost model that's just out in the wild, because then you can be boosting everything. You don't know what's going on, who's boosting what, what's getting boosted. Boost, I just want to try it one more time. So in here, it just lets you know that boost is only applicable within this newsfeed event model. Does that make sense? Cool. So proper scoping. Cool. That was a quick one. We just realized that boost was able to go in and talk to a newsfeed event model. Very, very quickly, very, very easily. We just add it as a dependency, plug it in, let it play. Everything's honky-dory. So our CSS dekerfuffled, our UI architected, and our components are talking to each other. Lastly, our JavaScript was all over the place before. We didn't know where it was, we didn't know how it worked, and we didn't know what it was going to do. So we kind of touched base on this a little bit before with Backbone or Require, so we know where everything is and where it's bringing in. But you're probably saying to yourself, like, Scott, like, that file alone had 3 dependencies. Those files probably have 3 or 4 dependencies. You're going to be bringing in like 20 JavaScript files. Holy HTTP requests, Batman. That is a lot. So, and we realized this. We knew that in order to have this really good architecture, we're going to need a lot of JavaScript files. And we just, whatever, it's cool. But we decided we really needed to figure out a way to bring this down, to make it more manageable, to make our CTO happy. Because he sees 20 JavaScript files, he's flipping desks. You don't want to get on that guy's bad side for HTTP requests. He is a force to be reckoned with. So we use grunt build, because we don't want a whole bunch of holy HTTP requests. We just want to grunt build it. Sorry. So grunt build, you ask. What grunt build does is just it's a node server program that runs on our deployment script. So whenever we go and deploy our code to one of our test servers or a production server, it goes through and it tracks all of the dependencies that we need for every single file, grabs them all, and says, okay, for our newsfeed file, we need all of these files. It grabs them, slams them all into one file, and then uglifies it. So that you just, instead of having 20 JavaScript files, you're just having one really ugly, really big, not that big, because uglify also minimizes everything and makes it smaller, but it's super ugly. No one knows what's going on in an uglified JavaScript file, which is pretty cool. So it just brings it all into one file where all your dependencies live, and you don't have to worry about anything. Also, you can use it for, if you have you realize that for every page, you're loading 7 or 8 different JavaScript files every single time. We have it in our build script to kind of go through and get all of these dependencies, all of these libraries that we're using, we group them all together and just throw them into one file, minified, concated, and we don't have to worry about those 7 or 8 different HTTP requests. We're just getting one. And lastly, this makes our CTO way too happy. I'm pretty sure he spends his entire lunch hour every day just scouring through our platform, seeing which JavaScript files are not needed that much, or which JavaScript file is loaded every time, which ones can be concatenated together. He's a loose cannon. He's just always going in there and just throwing files together and just seeing what happens. It's insanity. So having something like this that kind of goes in and does it for him is great. So we did it. We've crossed off all of our problems. Our CSS was all in a kerfuffle. We used Sass to tackle that problem because we wanted it to be more componentized, more modularized. We knew where everything is. It was easier to write. Our UI had no architecture. Not anymore. We went in for a mobile, used everything for Backbone. Everything had a nice data object attached to it. Everything looked nice. Everything worked really well. It was great. And with Backbone, we use require.js to just make sure that all of our components could be talking to one another, making sure that there's dependencies so they could work together and one thing could talk to another. It was perfect. And lastly, our JavaScript was all over the place. Not anymore. We fixed it. It was great. Cool. So let's have a little comparison. Modular functionality in code. Before, not so much. Now, yeah, good job. So a clean and understandable code. It's questionable. We'll say X. Now, yep. An extendable architecture. Before, definitely not. Now, yes. Code that's all over the place, not attached to any actual data objects, but works. We did it. Not anymore. It still works though, which is great. And lastly, an awesome platform. Of course it was awesome before. It got us where we are today. It was always a great platform, but it just could be better. I did this to make myself feel better. Cool. So let's hope we did this right. We took a step back and we did it better. Modular, modularized. Solid JavaScript framework. And we had real-time data parity between our UI and our server. Whatever was going on, we knew what was going on, and it worked great. Cool. So, what's not good enough, or where I want us to be tomorrow? My precious global JavaScript namespace / object. One JavaScript object to rule them all. It's even an O for object. It's great. It took a lot of time figuring that one out. So, what's needed globally? What's not needed globally? Well, a lot of things, but most primarily, we need language. Because our platform is being released soon with, like right now it's 3 languages, soon it's going to be like 30 or 50. I'm making the person that does our IE10Ns squiggle in their seats. It's not that many. It's going to be a lot. But anyways, languages are going to be needed everywhere in our UI because when you update things, you want to have the updated language there. So that's going to be needed globally. Current user information. Who doesn't love being able to say, like instead of having to go in and get the information from any DOM elements or where you're going to be getting it for certain viewpoints, so the newsfeed.user information, you just want to say, what is our current user's name? So you just Achiever's namespace .get current username, and it just returns you the name. Wherever you are, no matter what, you're going to get it. That's something I'm really excited about. So what would it do? We would not have to worry about ensuring this being loaded at every single controller level. Every single entry point into our site, we don't have to worry about manipulating what's going to be in there. It's just going to be there. It's something that you can always fall back on. Just like in PHP, you know you're going to have an if statement. We want to have it so that you know you're going to have the current user's information. And on update, so when you update a user's name, we wanted to tie into backbone models to trigger this update across everything. So instead of having Scott Spencer here, but in the JavaScript it's Scott Allen, you would just have it be Scott Allen automatically. So you don't have to worry about anything. So that would be super cool. And lastly, I really, 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 really want to migrate the architecture that we developed for our mobile newsfeed and put it onto our desktop. That way we just have a full data parity. We'd just be using the same newsfeed models, the same newsfeed event models. It would all be intermingled together, and it would just work beautifully. One newsfeed architecture for one fantastic newsfeed. Because then it would be a great newsfeed if it was just done better. Who did it the first time? Cool. And there are a lot more things I want to talk about, but we're out of time for today. So, I know, sorry guys. So, shall we recap? Always think about the future. If you're developing for now, you're developing wrong. You have to be developing for tomorrow, and next year, and next decade. Always think about what your code is going to be doing the next time you look at it. Backbone is a good JavaScript framework. It's really hard to learn, really hard to use when you're first using it, but it's worth it. It changes the way you develop user interfaces. Sass for styling. Who doesn't like doing even more computer science, especially in your CSS? Like, everyone can do CSS now, but Sass kind of just gives it that extra little power. It makes it easier, but it's a little bit more difficult to understand, but it's, yeah. You guys are smart people. You can figure it out. And lastly, require.js and grunt just wraps everything up really nicely, which wraps this presentation up nicely. Any questions? Any questions? Yeah, the back.
Can you talk a bit about the process around this? You have a pilot project you ran in parallel, or you stopped development while you re-architected?
Well, when we did this, it was all for our mobile, which we completely redid from the ground up. So we spent a little bit of time, I say a little bit, but it was actually quite a bit amount of time, where we looked at all the different frameworks. We kind of did a few betas, seeing what worked right, made sure it all kind of fit together before we really kind of dug down and did all the code. So we definitely had the luxury of starting something completely new where we can go in and just, you know, fiddle around with a few different technologies, see what worked best, and see how we liked it.
On that same note, like if that luxury wasn't there, like are there ways that you kind of phase out the rollout of some of these technologies? Like
Yeah.
have to do all, like, do you have any thoughts on that?
Of course, yeah. Like for us, we have a large feature set in our platform, so we could phase out so that our newsfeed is using this new architecture, but everything else isn't. Or for us, actually, we just recreated peer-to-peer in this new architecture so that we're just able to go in and test out this new architecture for different features in our platform and make sure that it makes sense and works before really digging deep and doing it for everything. So we can definitely say we baited it in a few features before diving deep and doing it fully for mobile. Does that answer your question? Great. Yep.
Do you guys have a discussion and was such a place that saw you use SAS? Like, is there any reason why you picked SAS over less, or you guys didn't even have a discussion?
Yeah, we had a discussion. We actually use SCSS, but SAS is a lot easier to use, and I was saying CSS instead of SCSS all the time, so that's why we actually use SCSS, but that was just that doesn't mean anything. But we liked SCSS because it made sense. It used curly brackets instead of SAS, which is kind of all tab-based. And yeah, we definitely sat down, looked at all the differences between them. We realized that SCSS was used a lot more. We could build it using Node, which we were going to be using for our grunt work with our require.js and grunt anyways. So it just all fit in nicely together. So that's pretty much why we decided to use it. Yeah.
Looking at Backbone now, and you mentioned it talking about, yeah, it seems very complicated up front. Achievers has a very big application, but
Yeah.
people are working on smaller applications. Is there any kind of minimum barrier to entry for a framework like Backbone in your eyes, or do you think going forward, any application you ever build, you're always going to pick a JavaScript framework? At least the way you think right now, or do you think there's some kind of minimum?
No, like for Backbone, like we're not even using Backbone to its full potential. Like a lot of people use it as a full single-page application, so that when you go in, like you're never refreshing the page again. Like you go into the application, if you go to one feature, you're just getting all the information, updating the view with it, and you're going into it. So we're not using it to the full functionality as it could be. So which is kind of great for small little projects, actually. So if you just have one little single page application, I would definitely recommend using Backbone or a JavaScript framework for it. Yeah, Bill?
What amount of work was required in the back end to facilitate the switch to an MVC?
Not a lot, actually. For when we did the mobile newsfeed, there was actually quite a minimal amount of work to go in and get the data the way we wanted it and just manipulate it into the data that worked for the MVC framework. We already had the data there, so we kind of manipulated the MVC on the front end to use that data the way it was. We just kind of took the data, encoded it into JSON so that we could get it into the DOM, and then just grab the data and use it how we may. Cool. Does that answer your question? Good. Any other questions?
Cool.
Excellent.
Thanks again, Scott.
Thank you.
All right, so quick little shameless plug. We are hiring all over our company right now, specifically in dev. So if you're interested, if you know anybody that's interested, just do us a favor and chat to somebody in the purple lanyard. We are actively growing our team and looking specifically for senior devs right now. So that would be awesome if you could help us out with that. Does anybody have any, I've never added this slide before, but does anybody have any general announcements for other groups or anything like that they want to do really quickly? We have a couple of minutes. No? Yes? Yeah.
Tomorrow night at the DMZ, we're having a meetup on using PayPal versus Stripe versus Salt. Everybody's used to paying 2.9%. Do you want to pay less? Figure out how and come to DMZ tomorrow at 5 o'clock, 6th floor.
Anybody else? No? Chris? Achievers is hiring, thanks. Anybody else? Last call? All right, cool. So as Scott mentioned, we do want to dive deeper. I think this is our first kind of UI-focused talk, but we covered a whole bunch of technologies. One thing we're thinking about right now is actually doing deeper dive, more dev-focused talks next year. So we're going to send out a survey on our meetup group. I'd really appreciate if you guys can kind of fill that out and help guide the direction of Achievers Tech Talks next year. And if you have specific ideas for talks that you want to do or somebody you know would be really good or well-suited to do a talk, reach out to us on any of our social networks. And if you have any follow-up questions for Scott, feel free to reach out through any of these forums, and we'll make sure that he answers them, and I'll hold him accountable personally. All right, so other than that, guys, stick around for a couple more drinks. If you're interested in talking to some of our devs about some of the technology things that came up, I know you had a couple of questions. Chris Marlowe right in the back corner right there with the hat will love to engage in conversation with you. He talks a little too much. But thank you very much, guys. We'll see you in the new year.